Yeah, I guess that's the surest sign yet that Jerry Colangelo has, changed the culture of the Sixers organization.
Yeah, having Sam Hinkie talk on this at practices, I don't know that it's ever happened in the 2.5 years that he has been here. But I want to give you talk a little bit about some of the things Colangelo and Hinkie said today. But first, there's a lot of discussion about Okafor. And, about 35 games into his rookie year, he got off to a start. His numbers look pretty good. But when you look at Okafor from the analytical world, are the Sixers actually better off without Okafor?
Well, that certainly was the case early in the season. I mean, it's a little unfair to put it, that way because of the fact that a lot of it is about, him and Nerlens Noel coexisting with each other on the court, and the fact that Noel's best position, his natural position, is almost certainly center. So, they've played a lot better when they've had Noel in that spot, and when they've had Noel and Okafor on the court together, things haven't gone nearly as well. And then the Noel at center lineups have played a lot better than the Okafor at center lineups. But, we're seeing, I think, both of those guys, obviously Noel play a lot better after the Ish Smith addition, but Okafor seems to be benefiting from that too. And it seems like the last couple of, weeks, those guys are not playing together quite as much, and I think that's another reason why he's shooting such a better percentage from the field. He's got better spacing around him, able to do the things that we know he's capable of down low.
A lot of people, there was an article in the Philly papers here this week. Keith Pompey wrote a piece that an NBA executive had said that they're going to have to trade somebody. Noel, Okafor, doesn't see that those guys could play on the floor together. Would you agree with that, watching these guys for about 35 games, that it's obvious that they can't coexist, or do you disagree with that?
I mean, they definitely can't coexist now. Does that mean that, in 2 or 3 years when, you're really starting to see these guys get into their primes, like that they're not going to be able to play with each other? That's a slightly different story. And that's what I think you're getting into with the have to trade. But, I don't think you're ever going to get the most out of those two guys if they're playing together. And that's where I think, if you can trade one of them for someone who's a better fit with the other, that it probably is something that the Sixers will want to explore.
What are you making of Nerlens Noel the last couple of weeks here? There was a lot of people that thought he had been regressing. Then when Ish Smith got thrown into the mix, it seemed like he has played a lot better here. He has admitted that playing center he feels more comfortable. So what do you make of Noel here the last 2 weeks or so?
Which is perfectly understandable. I was a bit more optimistic about the ability of Okafor and Noel to play together this season because of the fact that we did see Noel play a lot of power forward last year with Henry Sims, something that, Sixers fans surely remember but kind of got forgotten nationally. I think that worked out a little bit better because Sims, was able to step to the perimeter at times and wasn't the focal point of the offense in the same way that Okafor is rather. But the other factor is, Noel wasn't healthy, I think, with the wrist and the knee and missing a few games with soreness in those spots. And I think that's probably benefited him getting healthy as well.
Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com, is with us. The Sixers tomorrow night against the Chicago Bulls. What has, obviously, they've won a couple of games, which has been eye-opening since Christmas. Ish Smith, what has he brought to this team? He's been on 9 different teams in 5 years. So why does he fit here?
Well, I think partially it's the alternatives at the point guard position. I mean, that's why, in New Orleans, he was going to be he was the odd man out after Drew Holiday and Tyreek Evans got healthy because of the fact that, both of those guys are a bigger part of the Pelicans' future. But, he's able to go out and play his game and be a centerpiece in Philadelphia. And, he more than anything else, I think, it's his ability to create shots has been really useful, particularly down the stretch because, the Sixers have had a very inside-centric offense based around Okafor a lot of the season. That's tough to do late in games because of the fact that you can double, you can do different things to take a post scorer out of the offense. And now that, Smith is there to kind of be the focal point, Derek Bodner had some good stats on how high his usage rate has been in the last 5 minutes of close games. And that's the biggest difference, I think, between this Sixers team and what we saw before Christmas is they were so bad anytime the game was close late, even when they were in position to steal a win. And now they've been able to do that.
So let me ask you this. Just adding a journeyman NBA point guard, nothing against Ish Smith. That's virtually – but he's an NBA player. I mean, he's a legitimate NBA talent. whether he's a backup or whatever you want to make him. Does that show that the other pieces around him, with a little seasoning, that they're not as far off as maybe some people would suggest? Just sprinkling in a point guard has made them a competent NBA team all of a sudden?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not a huge surprise because, we saw this team at least play competitive, entertaining basketball at the end of last season. So we certainly knew that some of these other players could do it. And, the thing about the Sixers, they've got a lot of guys who could be role players on good teams. I think of someone like Hollis Thompson, where if you ask Hollis Thompson to create his own shot, he's going to look bad because that's not what he does. But if you stick Hollis Thompson in the corner and give him open threes, he's going to look good. So, getting even someone who, is not an accomplished, centerpiece, so to speak, of the offense, makes a big difference for guys like that.
A couple things Colangelo said today, Kevin, that obviously stood out. Hearing him in Philadelphia at practice is an interesting sign. But he said, as far as what people think the plan is, nothing is changing in terms of the course. Has actions spoken differently than what he said there?
That's interesting. I mean, you certainly look at the Ish Smith trade as being out of character for what the Sixers would have done under Hinkie in terms of, not maximizing the value of the picks that you had that you gave up for Ish Smith. But it definitely doesn't change the timetable or affect kind of the big picture direction of the franchise. I think we were just looking at an indication of what was to come. And if that's not the case, then, maybe it is just a move that they made because they thought it was the right move at this time.
He also said there's a chance for things to turn around real quick. Says the team could possibly be much better in 2016 and 2017. Is that far-fetched to believe?
Not at all, and I think that was going to be the case whether, even before Colangelo's arrival. When you look at potentially adding 4 first-round picks next year, almost certainly going to have at least 3 of them, and then Dario Saric, again, a report yesterday from David Pick that is consistent with everything else we've heard, that he has plans to come over next season, even though it's not best for him financially. So you put that all together, and, yeah, these Sixers could have a lot more talent next season.
Talk with Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com, NBA, and, of course, the Sixers tomorrow night right here on 97.3. Sam Hinkie actually spoke today, too, and he said we're quite optimistic about Joel Embiid. His bone is healing really well, a little faster than we anticipated. I had Brett Brown on last week, and he said I'm very, very confident that we will see a healthy Joel Embiid soon. I don't think you'll see him play this year, but is the feeling around the league that Embiid will finally make his presence felt on a court next year?
I mean, I think it's a little tough for people to count on it until they actually see it happen. Especially outside of Philadelphia. At least there you're getting a chance to see him warm up before games and start to work on his game as he did last season. The nature of these navicular injuries is it's kind of random whether they recur or not, and you hope for the best, but you can never guarantee that it's not going to happen again.
A lot of stuff, good stuff today from Hinkie and Colangelo. He also said it's been fun to have an outside perspective, especially someone as experienced as Colangelo. And Colangelo had said about 2 weeks ago in an interview, Kevin, that it's different for him now because in the past the buck always stopped with him. Was that surprising to hear him? Because I think a lot of people just assume that he's come in here and it's his way or the highway.
Absolutely, it's surprising. Yeah, I think that was the general consensus after he took over. There is a model for this sort of thing. I talked about it when Colangelo was hired. Jerry West being sort of the model of someone who came in, had a history as being the decider in the same vein as Colangelo, but as he got later in his career, took on what is now a consulting role for the Warriors, where he's one of several strong voices in their front office. So it's not inconceivable, but again, I think we're just going to keep watching the moves the Sixers made and reading the tea leaves to see what's going on there with their front office.
A lot of times, in what we do, we like to look back. If you're the 76ers at the 3rd pick right now, is Okafor still the guy you would have taken?
I think, if they had it to do over, Porzingis probably makes more sense as a fit next to their other talent and has just, shown immense upside so far this season, more even than I think his most ardent supporters believed at the time of the draft. But if we were redoing things like that, he probably would end up going number 2 to L.A. anyway.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. A lot of people, obviously, Porzingis has played very well. Do you think Porzingis is a legitimate number one player? I mean, is he a team that a franchise can build around?
I don't think we know that for certain yet because we still haven't seen him have to create a lot of his own shot. He did some of that last night after Carmelo Anthony was injured, and they won that game against the Celtics with him dealing with some foul trouble. But that's still the one thing we don't know about him. But he's also 20, so you wouldn't necessarily expect him to be at that level yet.
All right, plenty more, of course, will emerge from this Sixer season. We'll see what happens at the trade deadline. Are they going to be a player there? Another thing that Brett Brown mentioned on the air last week was don't count them out with all the cap space they have next year. So we'll see if they're a player in free agency next year as well. Could we be seeing, Kevin, the light at the end of the Sixers tunnel?
I think so. I think there's reason certainly to be hopeful in Philadelphia. And that's kind of what I wrote about today from the perspective of the Brooklyn Nets, where their fans don't have much reason to be hopeful because of the fact that, that team has traded away all its draft picks and is really relying on cap space to lure guys who probably are not going to want to play for what looks like a losing team. So, I think the contrast is there with the Sixers, where you have all these avenues to get better. Draft, free agency, guys you've already drafted. You're not pinning your hopes just to one thing.
Plenty more on this situation with the 76ers moving forward here. And don't forget, tomorrow night right here on 97.3. Saturday, they are back at home as well on Saturday night when the Sixers host Portland on Saturday. All right, Kevin, appreciate the time as always, pal.
Thanks for having me on.